So I've been asked to share some thoughts on what ordination bestows. Before I do that, it might be helpful to turn that question on its head and just consider for a second what it doesn't bestow. And I think I'd want to say that ordination doesn't make us a better human being or a better Christian. That's the first thing I'd want to say. Ordination doesn't give us holy hands where we're given special powers to dispense the Holy Spirit at will. Ordination isn't a job promotion. Just ask any ordained person and they will soon dispense you of that myth. It's not an invisible cloak that makes you infallible either. But having said all of that, ordination is definitely not nothing. So what does it bestow? Well, the first thing I want to suggest it bestows is an identity. And that's an identity both as a Methodist minister and a minister in the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Ordination and reception into full connection are entirely linked for the Methodist Church. So first of all, we're received into a covenant relationship with the Methodist Conference. That's the Methodist bit of Methodist minister. Before we're then sent off to be ordained as presbyters and deacons in God's global church. Then this identity is about being a representative person. If you go to the website, the Methodist Church website, you'll read these words about ordination. Ordination is a special form of lifelong commissioning in which the Church selects and appoints certain individuals to the office of presbyter and deacon and authorises them to undertake the work associated with that office. As officers of the conference, we speak on behalf of the Methodist Church, and that clearly comes with responsibility. When we wear the collar or when we wear the diaconal cross, we are noticed, and what we say and what we do is noticed. And that's true whether we're talking about being in the church or being in the community. And of course, the community also means the digital community. And that's perhaps especially important in this moment in time. I've often gone onto social media and to write a response to somebody and had to kind of stop and think, no, maybe that language isn't appropriate for a Methodist minister. And I've had to delete the comment quite rapidly. And in that statement on the website, just notice those words lifelong commissioning. Because even though we may not be wearing the uniform, if you like, we're never technically off duty. And then I want to say that this identity gives you a passport into some interesting places. My current setting for ministry is in a university as a university chaplain. And I've had all kinds of conversations simply by being there and wearing the collar. And when I was in circuit ministry, I was invited unconditionally into people's homes in their moments of joy and in their moments of grief. And I was able to hold them before God as that representative person. And then just occasionally you might receive a random invitation, for example, to read a psalm at the launch of a new lifeboat while you're stood in front of the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall, or to say grace at the university meal at Mansion House in London, attended by the Lord Mayor of London and Princess Anne. That may or may not have happened. This identity that we're talking about is then shaped through what we call formation. In our training, for ministry, we enter a program of lifelong learning. Some of that learning is formal study, but we're also learning throughout the course of our ministry. Every year I've been in ministry has taught me something new. I've had a new experience. Some of those lessons have been quite unexpected, like how to deal with a chap who has just knocked a hole in the wall between his shop and your church. Now, unfortunately, our rule book doesn't cover that eventuality. But mostly those new experiences have been new encounters of God's love and God's grace through people, through places, and through situations. So that's identity. I then want to suggest that ordination bestows a requirement to live a life in balance, or we might even say in tension. Part 19 of the Presbyteral ordination service talks about the balance between justice and mercy. So, for example, we are called to be pastoral people, but we're also called to challenge. Remember, we're engaging in the ministry of Christ, who wasn't shy of calling out bad behaviour when he saw it, and to offer some very challenging words. That's part of what it means to be pastoral. And then we're called to hold that balance between pilgrimage and responsibility. So yes, we are called to journey alongside others and to do that pastorally, but we're not required or called to be their rescuers. And then we're called to celebrate the life of the church as it is, but also to hold up a vision to the church of how life could be with God. And sometimes those things can cause conflict. Then there's a balance between our duty and our delight, and these are about tasks that are shared collegiately. So part 13 of the ordination service in the Methodist worship book describes tasks that we're called to as part of Christ's wider ministry. And there are many, and they are demanding. But in that duty, there is a delight to preach, to baptize, and to preside for a presbyter, to minister Christ's love and compassion, and to seek out the lost and the lonely as a deacon, and to do all of those things in God's name. Duty and delight. And there's the balance between freedom and discipline. So we're given a stipend, and we're given a house, we call it a manse, and a pension, so that we don't have to support ourselves financially. And that means then we can free up as much time as possible to be able to be the ministers and do the ministry that we're called to. Now, the stipend isn't huge. It's currently set at just below £25,000, but it's enough. And other costs are covered too, such as council tax and water rates. The reason we're provided with those things, and particularly the manse, is because we also need to understand the nature of itinerant ministry. And for both presbyters and deacons, that involves direct stationing in the first instance. And that usually continues for deacons throughout the course then of their ministry. This isn't a job, it's a way of life, a vocation. And we've already said that there are tasks to do, but throughout our ministry we're called to model a way of being that mirrors the life of Jesus Christ. Now that's a tough calling, but it's incredibly rewarding. Because within that framework, there is so much freedom that we have. We're essentially in control of our own diaries, allowing us and freeing us up to be the ministers that God is calling us to be. To strike that balance between being and doing. And then as a minister in full connection with the Methodist Church, with the Methodist Conference, this is never done in isolation. So we're mutually accountable through the connection to and for our local churches, to and for the district synods, and for the conference itself. Then I want to suggest that ordination bestows help. Might seem a strange thing to say, but I want to say that ordination offers us a place of colleagueship. So, for example, the circuit staff meeting should be a place where you can share your joys and your frustrations mutually together and to be held in love together. The phrase we use in Methodism is to watch over one another in love. And then every presbyter and deacon is placed into a formal pastoral supervision relationship. Now that's a formal space which invites us to grow and flourish in our ministry in a boundaried 1.5 hour conversation 6 times a year, focused on our context and our ministry. What about friendship? Well, I want to suggest that is entirely possible in ministry, but it comes with the caveat of maintaining appropriate boundaries. So, for example, when I first came into ministry, I tried to be the professional and to keep people at a distance. And then I wondered why nobody would talk to me freely and openly. So it was only when I stopped trying to be the minister and to be Ian, the person that God had called to ministry, that's when trust and eventually friendships began to form. Then ordination bestows on us a lifetime of challenges. And the first of those challenges is the challenge between the public versus the private life. I never realised just how interesting the contents of my shopping trolley were until I went around the supermarket wearing the collar. But again, that highlights something of the aspect of this representative ministry. So protecting holidays, protecting days off, protecting rest times, time off becomes increasingly important. There is a challenge of knowing when to speak and when to listen. There is the challenge of balancing the needs of your home life with the needs of the church life. So make sure you keep your priorities in check and that those who are close to you know that you care about them. And there's the challenge of Christian love and discipleship among some very difficult people. The phrase is that you can't choose your family. Well, you can't choose your Christian and church family either. We're called to be in this together. And of course, we're all different and have different priorities. And sometimes ours are not shared with others. This may all sound like a huge task and a huge responsibility, and it is. But take away these two words, privilege and responsibility. And also take away the fact that it's God who calls us to ministry. It's God who equips us for Christ's ministry. And that's through the gift and the indwelling of God's Holy Spirit within us. May God bless you as you continue to discern whether this is your calling.